Thank you for joining us for this fourth installment of our Special Collections Summer Seminar Series. Today is Juneteenth, a day of celebration that commemorates the formal end of slavery in this country, and we turn our attention to the history and persistence of racial injustice in Iowa and the Midwest. I'm Janet Weaver, the Assistant Curator of the Iowa Women's Archives. Joining me today is Erik Henderson, a graduate student specialist working in the archives. Erik earned a BA in history from Grinnell College in 2019 and is entering his second year in the School of Library and Information Science. He's worked in the IWA for over a year and, like the rest of us, has been working remotely since the start of the pandemic. The COVID-19 pandemic has laid bare the racism that permeates our institutions and culture and threatens the very fabric of our society. It is etched in the murder of George Floyd at the hands of the police, and it is seen in the disproportionate impact of the virus on those most vulnerable in our society, among them the essential workers employed in Iowa's meatpacking industry. Our talk focuses on the contributions of Black and Latinx leaders in Iowa who fought for change between the 1940s and the present day. Erik will start by discussing his involvement in the current uprisings and the importance of preserving the papers of those who've been marginalized from mainstream historical narratives, in part because their voices are underrepresented in archival repositories.
Thank you, Janet. I cannot address the subject of racial injustice in the Midwest without first speaking on a matter that has plagued society, specifically the Black community, for centuries in this country. By now, most of us have seen the horrific video. The video that has reignited fury in the hearts of many citizens. The video that proves that white supremacy, discrimination based on how you are race, and a lack of compassion and understanding still exists and are prevalent in this country, this continent, and throughout this planet. The video that shows the last breath of someone's child being taken away by those sworn to serve and protect. What are we to do when the people we are supposed to call do not serve you, rather deter you? Do not protect you, rather deject you? How do you expect a young Black person to respect blue lives when there is a lack of care and constant mistreatment from them? History works to preserve moments, objects, and ideas that society deems valuable to the collective consciousness. That moment was documented, but it was not meant to be preserved. Preserving that moment signifies that this country values the image of unjust murder, an image that re-traumatizes instead of informs. However, because there was someone there to capture that terrible moment, George Floyd's death has drastically shifted mass societal thinking over the past 3 weeks. My own interview efforts work to preserve the results of this shift, placing value on the experiences of real people and their voices, often muffled by broad media portrayals and gossip chains of the White House. Before I share with you all about my experiences as a historian, an archivist, and a protester, I would like to take a step back and consider historically why the police force cannot serve and protect because it was formed with such opposite intentions. How many people know why law enforcement was established? In his writing about policing in the US, Victor Kapler explains, the birth and development of the American police can be traced to a multitude of historical, legal, and political economic conditions. The Institute of Slavery and the control of minorities, however, were two of the most formidable historical features of American society shaping early police. Slave patrols and night watches, which later became modern police departments, were both designed to control the behaviors of minorities. In 1704, the colony of Carolina developed the nation's first slave patrol. Slave patrols helped to maintain the economic order and to assist the wealthy landowners in recovering and punishing slaves who essentially were considered. Kapler details the relationship between the Black community and the federal government perfectly. Because my people were once considered property, many white Americans believed they needed to be monitored to prevent rebellions. This ideology became sustainable in society due to the erosion of history by white hands and pens. When you control the pen, you have control of the story, and the story is everything. The only solution to this infectious disease is abolishing law enforcement and implementing community watches. During this period of societal reflection, I look at my place at this university and in the United States. I have a responsibility to those who fought before me, Iowa women like Martha Nash, Esther Walls, and Edna Griffin, to do more to amplify my voice and the marginalized voices around me. The papers of Esther Walls and Martha Nash are preserved in the IWA. I have written blog posts about what I've learned from their lives. It was heartwarming when Walls shared this experience in her oral history review. And then someone asked her during a program, "Are you Esther Walls? We're so glad, and we're so glad you're Black." Walls had to relocate to New York in order to obtain employment due to job discrimination in Iowa. Yet, the impact she made for her community in New York is remarkable. For Nash, her efforts to get her voice heard throughout local Iowa radio was helpful for many. She believed if our determination lags, if we become petulant, if we delay in facing up to the tough decisions immediately ahead, we will pay a huge price. The fight that we are faced with today falls under the same realm. My experience engaging with the collections in the IWA and my own university and workplace gave me a deeper connection to them because I felt as if I was discovering one of my family members. What I took away from those experiences is to be true to yourself. Whatever your passion and what you believe in, go for it. You never know the impact and who you might reach. Looking at my own experience protesting, there was a moment of realization when law enforcement attacked people moving peacefully that things are not the way they should be. We are all humans. We breathe the same air. We drink the same water. We eat the same food. What is the difference? Once we all realize there is no difference, we can begin to try to move beyond the pain and attempt to heal. I did not see us any different than those who marched with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in 1963. Today, we have a following that is supportive and vocal about what we believe is right. That is justice. We are still fighting for Dr. King's dream, and until that dream is reached, we have to remember that America was founded in order to be the land of the free. Why are those who built this empire the ones to be exiled? My role in the Iowa City protest has been to get a message across to my people. We need to be vocal about our demands. Now, I present a new message to myself and all of you. We need to push the archivists in charge of collection development towards obtaining more collections about Black Americans in Iowa and the Midwest. Uncovering the veil of history that has blinded America, offering a more inclusive representation of diverse stories, and portraying more accurate accounts about the past will hopefully begin a real conversation towards progress as humans, as one people. I have conducted a few oral history interviews with community activists. What I've learned from them is no matter the size, your contribution is necessary. The problem that North America and the rest of the world is facing is years of misunderstanding and lack of respect, communication, ultimately trust. If we all begin with communicating with our fellow citizens to find common ground, we might begin the domino effect to building healthy relationships. Before I wrap up, I would like to reflect on a conversation Janet and I were having a few days ago. She asked me if I considered preserving my own papers to be archived one day, and how I view the world due to working in archives. Looking at the past lives of people I never met, I felt as if I knew them my whole life. And I want everyone else to feel that connection to those that came before them that they did not know. I never thought of being someone that mattered to be archived, but then I thought of all the people I came to make intellectual connections with from the past. I then decided that I want to be that for someone. I do not want to have the fame and the glory, but I want people to remember that I cared.
Thank you, Erik. Erik makes a powerful case for the importance of building greater diversity into archival collections and why that matters so much. What is preserved in our repositories has the potential to shape new and more accurate narratives about the past. Take, for example, the story of Dolores Garcia. Here you see her photograph on the front page of the cover of Ain't I a Woman, a feminist press with national circulation, published in Iowa City in the 1970s. In 1970, Iowa City feminists went to Davenport to interview Garcia, who was calling for a boycott of Oscar Mayer Company products. because of the company's discriminatory hiring practices. The newspaper ran the story under the headline, "Not Everybody Loves an Oscar Mayer Wiener." The signs of the Mexican-American and Black protesters proclaimed, "Boycott Oscar Mayer, Brown is beautiful," and 1970, Year of the Chicano. Garcia's story is important. Because it helps situate Iowa Latinas at the vanguard of the women's movement in the 1970s. Adding it to the historical narrative reframes and enriches our understanding of second-wave feminism and Chicano activism in the Midwest. In organizing the rally, Garcia had worked with a coalition of Latino and Black activists, among them Ernest Rodriguez. His papers and those of his sister, Estefania Rodriguez, are preserved in the Iowa Women's Archives, and they're among the most frequently used collections in our repository. At the time of the rally, Rodriguez worked on the kill floor at Oscar Mayer. He was an experienced community organizer, a founding member of the Davenport League of United Latin American Citizens Council in Davenport, and served on the city's recently formed Human Relations Commission, where he consistently stressed the urgent need to improve community police relations. He brought the issue of discrimination in education to the Davenport School Board in 1969, telling its members that Black and Latino children were victims of, I quote, discriminatory middle-class thinking in a system that perpetuated low achievement among disadvantaged children. He asked the board to require its teachers to lift the veil of whatever obscures your vision, look into our hearts, look into our minds, read about us, know us, understand us. Rodriguez and his siblings grew up poor. They lived in a railroad boxcar in a predominantly Mexican barrio known as Holy City in Bettendorf. Their father was a Mexican immigrant who came to the US in 1910. Their mother was an African American from Gadsden, Alabama. And in the photograph on the left, you see Muggy Adams Rodriguez standing with neighborhood children by the pump. The smallest child there is Estefania Rodriguez. And then in the photograph on the right, you see the Rodriguez children standing outside their boxcar home in Holy City in Bettendorf. And the map shows where those boxcars were located in that barrio. In the 1940s, Davenport, like many Iowa cities, was deeply discriminatory in its practices around employment, housing, and public accommodation. Historically, Iowa legislatures appear progressive in terms of passing civil rights legislation, but those laws proved difficult to enforce. For example, when Robert Jackson Sr. moved to Des Moines from Missouri in the 1930s, he was struck by the extreme segregation he found. In this interview recorded for the Iowa Labor History Oral Project preserved at the State Historical Society in Iowa City, Jackson recalled, "Regardless of what they say about Missouri at that time, it was more integrated than Iowa was, especially Des Moines. Where I come from, the only thing that I knew was two types of work, the coal mines or working in the stores around there. And that employment was readily available to any of us, Black, white, Italian, or whatever. When I got here, the only type of job that was open was the maid in the hotel or the janitor or cleaning up one of the theaters. So the job discrimination was quite a bit more here than it was in Missouri, where I was from." After the war, Jackson took part in a boycott at the Katz drugstore. During the war, he remembered, people had been out in the ordnance plant and they've been making good money. They managed to save some. They worked into some good jobs. So the first things they wanted to do when they were working downtown was sit down and eat. And they wouldn't let you eat at the lunch counters. We had a sit-in, and a lady called Edna Griffin started that at Katz. Later known as the Rosa Parks of Iowa, Edna Griffin called the sit-in because, like Jackson, she was appalled at the level of segregation she found in Des Moines. And you can learn more about the Katz boycott and successful lawsuit that followed from a wonderful documentary called Black Des Moines Voices Seldom Heard, produced by Verda Williams. And that video is available on YouTube, courtesy of Iowa State University. And I should say that Edna Griffin's papers and the papers of Verda Williams are preserved in the IWA. But the Katz boycott wasn't the first times Iowans had sought enforcement of the state's 1884 public accommodation law. In 1945, Charles and Ann Toney had won a landmark suit in Iowa District Court after they were refused service at a Davenport ice cream parlor. By the 1960s, the Toneys were leaders of the largest civil rights organization in Iowa, known as the Catholic Interracial Council, or CIC, which Ernest Rodriguez and other Latinos were also active in. In 1963, CIC members organized a rally in Davenport to be held 5 days before the National March on Washington. Over 2,000 people gathered for the rally, and John Howard Griffin, the author of Black Like Me, was the keynote speaker. He had dyed his skin black to travel through the South. And Ann Toney told me that when Griffin had come to Davenport, he had stayed at their home and had told them that he would have included Iowa in his journey had he realized how entrenched racism was in the Midwest. In 1965, Martin Luther King Jr. came to Davenport to receive the Patchaman Terrace Award for Peace and Freedom. And in the photo on the right, you see Charles Toney presenting Dr. King with the award. The papers of Charles and Ann Toney are preserved in the African American Museum in Cedar Rapids, and there are also several great collections at the St. Ambrose University Archives about civil rights in Davenport and at the Putnam Museum in Davenport. In the years that followed the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, coalitions of community-based organizations in Davenport, including the CIC, the NAACP, and LULAC, brought hard-earned victories, such as the city's 1968 Fair Housing Ordinance. Now, the Davenport Ordinance went beyond the Iowa Fair Housing Law that had been enacted the previous year. The reason was because it did not require a $500 bond to be posted when a complaint was filed. As June Franklin, the only Black woman in the Iowa General Assembly, explained, no bonding company would underwrite the $500, which means that $500 cash is required. In 1968, the Davenport LULAC and its allies turned their attention to the consumer boycott of California table grapes that was sweeping the nation. LULAC members and their allies at supermarkets handed out leaflets and organized rallies to persuade supermarkets to stop carrying California table grapes. Rita Vargas, the 10-year-old daughter of the head of the local Huelga committee, if you look at the newspaper clipping on the left, you'll see Rita standing by her father, Henry Vargas, who's carrying the sign that says justice and dignity for the farm worker. Rita recalled that standing picket duty with her dad was controversial and at times frightening. People would yell at them, swear at them, and spit at them. Concurrent with the Great Boycott campaign, a high-profile battle was being waged for the rights of migrant workers employed on Iowa farms. In 1967, Latinx activists and their allies supported a Migrant Child Labor Bill to establish a minimum age for the employment of migrant children on Iowa farms. After months of heated debate, the bill was finally signed into law, but it was extremely weak. The new law prohibited farmers from, I quote, knowingly employing migrant children under 10 at any time, and children under 14 before and during school hours. The use of the word knowingly, of course, made the law unenforceable, as farmers could always plead ignorance of the age of any child that they employed. 2 years later, activists marched in Des Moines to force legislators to strengthen that migrant child labor law and to establish minimum housing standards for migrant workers on Iowa farms. Between 1944 and 1970, Black and Latinx Iowans forged a path to full and equal citizenship through complex intersections of race, class, and gender. Building on their experience of community-based activism, they fought for lasting policy changes grounded in state and local laws that would benefit Black and Latino families in Iowa. And I just included this final slide that lists some of the materials I've referenced. And I would add that all of the articles published in the Annals of Iowa are available open access online, and they're a wonderful resource. And now I'd like to turn it back to Erik for concluding remarks.
It may be a difficult topic to discuss, but if you were in the shoes of Black Americans and ethnically diverse people, you would feel how tight the laces are. What most people are doing is not living. They are trying to survive in a country, in a world that demonizes, villainizes, and delegitimizes our existence, our experience, and our voice on a daily basis. The power is truly in the people. We can make change in the world as long as we are persistent, insightful, and innovative. In order to see the change we want in the world, we have to make that change within ourselves first. Do we want to continue down the path that brought turmoil back to the community, or do we want to be active in all of our roles as good Samaritans of the earth? What people are fighting for in the streets for the past 2 to 3 weeks has been dignity and equality. As an archivist, what I am fighting for is representation. Representation in the institutions that people were once excluded from. Stories of real people who made efforts towards change need to be acknowledged and taught about. In doing so, we will create a new portrayal of history that is inclusive of all of society. Archives and their collections are how we remember the events, people, and important places of the past. Can we truly be a collective without all of society depicted? Remembering and celebrating those who came before us, who have been silenced due to systematic injustice, is fundamentally important to archives and libraries worldwide. Thank you for listening.